So let's start about this new session. Do you guys has the topics or questions? They really should print more.
I can open my, I think it's on my laptop.
Yeah, I'll try to cast the topics on the screen in just a moment.
Okay.
I will look on my WhatsApp web so that I can take a photo to cast it on.
Start then. Shall I start with, because I've got it up on my laptop?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah?
So I will just read the first questions. So this session is about indicators of confidence. So ISO proposes 5 indicators of confidence in the accuracy of age assurance system. They are asserted, basic, standard, enhanced, and strict, include considering the relative merit of setting classification accuracy for basic at 80% or 90%, standard at 95% or 99%, enhanced at 99% or 99.9%, and strict at 99.9% or 99.99%. I think this is just what we talk about, right?
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it's all the figures. So the confidence, it means the confidence level, confidence intervals. So the first question is what are the practical implications of setting classification accuracy threshold for different level of confidence in age assurance systems such as basic, standard, enhanced, and strict, and how do these thresholds impact system performance and usability? Like, yeah, just to go on the talk, and I will somehow cast these things on the screen.
Yeah, so I think that the question here is, so in the ISO, they've got a headline accuracy statement which they're talking about, which then they want to back up with more detailed measures, you know, from that confusion matrix, the binary measures. So, for example, your true positive rate or your false positive rate. But they wanted to map the overall accuracy to this idea of different confidence levels, basic, standard, enhanced, and strict. And they've given some potential possible values of what those should be. And I guess, yeah, they're interested in understanding what people think about those, what the implications of setting these kind of accuracy thresholds are they realistic? Yeah, are they usable? I guess it'd be interesting to see what people think. Sorry.
I have to go first, please. Then talk to you. So I think first of all, the aim of having a single indicator of confidence is a laudable one. It's great. A great aim to have, but I think it's problematic. And I think that came up briefly, only very briefly, next door where I know some of us have come from, because there are actually quite a number of different factors which affect the overall, I guess, efficacy of an age assurance system. And the importance of those different factors may differ from one use case to another. So some, solution. So for example, so the main area that I work with is around age restricted sales in retail, and the true negative rate there is, I think, the most important measure. So yes, true positive rate is important, but what's more important is making sure that we don't accidentally age estimate somebody that's that's under.
It's reducing the harm. You want you don't want your positive, right? Yeah.
Yes, but there may be other use cases. I don't know. For example, online gaming, where I'm plucking something out the air, where actually application accuracy is more important. What you don't want to stop. I don't know. Most people that are between 12 and 15 from accessing games that are intended for 12 plus, for example, perhaps.
Yeah.
I'll pause there so that's not speak. Oh, sorry, the other thing was, the numbers themselves are, you can't go about setting what the numbers are, what the levels are, until you've agreed what it is you're measuring. Because it's classification accuracy, I'm not sure, but I don't believe that any age estimation system in the world is yet capable of 80% for a very tight, for a very tight range of ages. Whereas for through negative rate, there are certainly already systems, including ours, that are capable of 99.9%.
But you're losing a lot in the triple.
Yes, which is balanced by having a much higher false negative rate.
I find the use of accuracy interesting, especially when we look at basic age assurance, because it means that you happen to have a user population that say is 95% adults. You've accomplished basic age assurance by doing literally nothing.
Yes.
You don't even have to ask the user if they're over 18 or not. And I think in a lot of regulatory frameworks that is insufficient for age assurance, and it would be surprising to me if the standard allows for that. And I do think it's interesting because we do want to measure harms, and harms are not only in where you get it wrong, but sometimes also in how much you get it wrong. So for example, giving a 5-year-old content, adult content is much more harmful, I think, from most people's point of view, than giving a 17-year-old access to that same adult content.
I would disagree that we need to mix the harms in this discussion. I think that it would be useful to say, this is the viability of the system. And then it's a policy matter as to what level of viability is required to mitigate with particular harms. So I think that blending them would be you would probably make the conversation more confusing and may not come up with better systems.
I suppose if you're going to get 1 out of 10 users wrong, if those 1 out of 10 users are near the age boundary versus those same 1 out of 10 users are all young children, I think you would say one of those two systems is doing a better job, whereas they both would have 90% accuracy. So it's not a complete measure of performance, I'd say, from that perspective, and it's hard to entirely disentangle it from harms if you're looking at the bad outcomes being what you're trying to mitigate with this. I also think that some of this, in terms of the trade-offs that you get with user privacy from requiring the types of methods required to reach higher assurance levels, might not be well communicated to regulators if those are the trade-offs that they would be making by requiring it. I think people will all want to protect children. And why would you not pick the strictest assurance level for anything out there if you possibly have it laid out in front of you at that point? And I think that that's also something that needs to be balanced, because there are also harms in terms of access for users to things, as well as harms in terms of the amount of privacy exposure that users have when using technology as well.
I think one thing which is important is to know what are we talking about in this accuracy, because if we have a system that is labeled to have, let's say, a strict age assurance, so a very high percentage of accuracy, and then one person discovers a leak, a vulnerability. For example, I just changed something in the URL of the age assurance system, and I pass automatically. And then this system has been labeled as a strict age assurance because in the laboratory setting or the experimental setting or the certification setting, we've had this high level of accuracy. Maybe we've had balanced data sets to make sure that we are not biased by the fact that there are more adults than children in the group or something. But we have a nice protocol, for example, described in the part 2 of the standard, which is about benchmarking. We have a nice protocol to establish the accuracy, but what if actually the accuracy is not right? Because if the way it's worded in the standard, we have 2 possibilities. First possibility is wording the assurance level by words, saying strict age assurance requires at least 2 components, 2 different sources of age assurance to be strict. And the other way of doing it is by having like accuracy as in the machine learning community. And I think it is dangerous because this can change over time. This is more subject to finding bypassing these systems, like if a VPN or any kind of there's a way to bypass, and actually 100% of the children can go through the system because they know a way around. It doesn't matter that the system is a strict age assurance system in the certification or standardization proposal. So I think it's better, it's my opinion, to describe them with what they propose in terms of efficacy of doing age assurance with security, maybe to prevent some bypassing, than to try to set perfect percentage, which will be really hard to measure, follow over time, and make sure that they're accurate on the broad scope, which is not only not malicious, I don't know the word in English, but not malicious person presenting himself honestly in front of an age assurance system.
Yeah, I think the word that's hurting us here is the word accuracy, because I think really the term is efficacy. So if you have a system that is highly accurate and easily bypassed, it doesn't have good effectiveness.
Well, if I look at the document, it doesn't speak about accuracy. The current definition is saying strict age assurance is a claimed age claimed by the natural person. When you do some kind of age control, you don't need to claim your age. You need to provide a proof that you are over some age threshold value. So it started very badly.
Yeah, that sounds wrong.
And then you should use at least 2 other assurance components from 2 independent sources to get that level. And this is based on a document that I've been able to read because it was communicated on the Working Group 5 mailing list, that is saying when you get 2 information from 2 different sources, you get a better confidence. And this morning I made a presentation. If you have a confidence of 50% from one component, 50% from another component, do you get 55%? Do you get 100%? Do you get 25%? No, you get 50%, and you are better to cost a coin to know the results. The same applies when you have 80% of confidence, I don't know what it means, and 90% of confidence. Do you have 85%? Do you have 80%? You have the higher of the 2, 80. Now, when you take a look now at the figures, it says it's based on a combination of age assurance components that satisfactorily provides confidence in being correct. Being correct, what does it mean? At a rate of 9,9999 out of 10,000, which means you have 1 chance out of 10,000 to be wrong. If the individual is around 18, can you estimate the age with a probability of error of 1 out of 10,000? This is strictly impossible, even by a human person. It cannot do that. And since it applies to everything, it's simply silly, does not make sense. Now, from a technical point of view, you have 2 main components to be able to have some kind of confidence. First is, do you know whether the age-related attribute is correct? Does it indicate correctly whether it can say it's over 18, for example, or it's under 25? That's one component. The other component is, does that attribute relate to the right individual?
Yeah.
And that's much difficult because you are online. And if you remember a cartoon in the New York, in an American journal, where you were
About the dog.
seeing the dog
Yeah.
sitting at the computer. Nobody knows on the internet that I am a dog. The same applies to any individual. How do you know it's not a dog? How do you know it's not an adult? How do you know it's the right person? So getting a confidence in that, it's very tricky. Well, I work on that, and I concluded 2 things. You have 2 technologies. One, technology is edge estimation. And this morning I make a presentation where it's very easy to fool the system. You have Alice and Bob. Alice first connect on a smartphone, and then she is on the site say, are you more than 18? Or she say, yes, Alice is 12. Okay. Next screen is now, do you accept that I can make a face analysis of your face? Before saying yes, she handed the phone to Bob. Bob is 25. And then he said yes. Smile on the screen. And the result is you are over 18. And if you want to proceed, press enter. Now he handed the phone back to Alice. Alice pressed enter, and now she can access the website. Now, there are also some very key on websites saying, oh, I'm going to annoy you one more with that. So we use a cookie to remember that. So next time she accesses the website, she don't need Bob to be present once again. It's very easy. She can access the website. What kind of confidence can you get? No confidence at all. It's impossible to achieve a high level of confidence or even a low level of confidence using edge estimation. However, using edge verification, it's possible. Now, the same kind of fraud that I call the Alice and Bob collision attack exists, but you can counter it if you impose the user to use a trusted application. And today, in the smartphone environment, where you use mostly Android and iOS from Apple, you have trusted application running in a trusted execution environment. And you can basically verify that the user is using that environment. And there are also other processors running in Windows environment, on iOS environment, that have already the hardware present to support trusted application. The OS do not do that yet. So it means today you can do that with smartphone, but you will be able to do that with laptops as well in the future, near future, because they have the same kind of technology for other processors, I would say. So I believe that strict or maybe enhanced will be possible. Because basically, if you are using a trusted application, you can get an error of less 1,000, because all the system relies on the document of the device that has been used initially to know that the person is, for example, above 18. And if you are using face IDs of where the number of fake IDs is not so numerous, it does exist, but it can be under 1 out of 1,000. So my personal view is to ask the removal of the indicator of confidence in the document. At the previous session, well, in the first session, they were there, we asked them to go out. Since there was about 400 comments, we had no time to review all the comments, and the editor puts back again in the core of the document the indicator of confidence that was put place in an annex. So currently they are in the document. The originals of the document were coming from the SCCS, and they are advocating their use, and their use is currently in the document in part 1 and in part 2. And I'm not keen at all to keep this kind of information. And for your information, because you are not a working group 5 participant, and only working group 5 participant can be present in working group 5 session. We had a session on part 1, and we have a 1-hour discussion on both the title of the document and the scope of the document. And we came to a conclusion on the scope. We make it shorter. And making it shorter, the indicator of confidence that we are present in the scope disappear. Knowing the exact age of the person disappear. So there is no more problem with the scope, since it is not speaking of indicator of confidence anymore. We are going to add another principle, because at the moment it's saying including privacy principle, and we are going to enhance that to say including security and privacy principle, which doesn't make any harm. So at least the scope will not mandate anymore to consider indicator of confidence within the document.
I do think, though, that as flawed as, did we just get signed out? Are the people offline now? I think it's inevitable because of the regulatory environment that this concept that I can say, this system, this solution has certain attributes which allow me to say I conform to a regulation. And so I think this original 5-tier approach was the first effort to say we can assign levels of confidence for the purpose of conforming to a regulation. And I agree with you that the method that they use is flawed, it's unworkable, and it's really completely arbitrary. But I do think that we cannot avoid in the framework document, at least addressing the concept of indicators of confidence, because I mean, just like with the identity proofing, we can say identity proofing level 2, and that means something in a standard and a regulation can point to it. So
it doesn't make sense at all.
but I know it
doesn't make sense because, well, we have a part 2, which is benchmarks.
Which is benchmark.
And if you want really to evaluate a system, you have about 25 benchmarks that are set, that are described to evaluate the system. And if you describe the answer to this question, for example, well, there are questions of principle, objectives that applies to relating party. You have objectives that applies to other components like edge control systems. And depending on who they are also different. So basically, you need to distinguish between the objectives that applies to one component and another component that is part of the overall ecosystem.
Yes.
So indicator of confidence will disappear because you will have to say, how can you really be sure that the binding of the edge-related attribute is correct?
Yes.
Now,
So that's
that should be independently, well, should not evaluated, but
Well, that's the
mentioned.
hardest problem. All the other
Explain.
problems are trivial compared to the binding, in my opinion.
The binding is well, that's a term, a technical term used in our community.
I think it's a very helpful term. by the
Yeah.
way.
So and then the accuracy is very simple. The accuracy, if you are using edge verification, since the information is derived from the date of birth or an information knowing the date of birth, like a credit card, and you know that the person has a credit card, so he is over 18. The accuracy is 1 day. An accuracy of 1 day with edge estimation using facial analysis is impossible. You cannot do that.
So I kind of want to take exception to the bit about age estimation, but I'll try and hold back on that because I don't think the discussion. Sorry,
No.
So usually
I won't try and
Everybody's being up here because otherwise this becomes the Mark and Denise show, and we're not trying to get, take over the meeting.
so usually you know that first you don't need to know the age. You don't need to disclose the age.
Right.
Basically, what you need is a system able to perform a classification and say, does this person belong to the class being over 18? That's a question.
And
The question is not.
I think it is important to comment on it, right?
Yeah.
I'm one of the providers of age assurance, right? If my clients, my potential clients keep saying, we are not sure if your system is good enough. That's why we are going to excuse ourselves for not doing that. If they refuse to do age assurance, that leaves us in a state worse than an imperfect state. So we can I wholeheartedly agree with you when it comes to defining what is technically feasible and realistic, but we cannot look at that in isolation. It makes me remember, I also had an academic past, and in AI conferences and journals, people keep posting about how much more accurate their systems are, but they would be completely overlooking other considerations. Maybe your system is highly accurate, but it is so large that it's not really accessible to many providers, or maybe the system's misclassification, as you have mentioned, might be different in terms of the types of harms it might introduce at the level of in certain instances, right? So what I believe is more important as a missing component is are the input of regulators, okay? Because we're talking about 80% accuracy. Let's for the sake of argument, for the sake of argument, we are able to measure it perfectly, 80% accuracy
or efficacy of the whole system.
Okay, so let's for the sake of argument, we are able to measure the efficacy with a certain number. Is that something that we are looking forward to optimize? Can we live with that or not? That is something that has to be placed there. I see. Okay, that we've got five brackets, right?
Actually, 8. There's
Yeah.
more. There's more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like we've got asserted, basic, standard, strict. Does that align with the societal goals that we're trying to set in? Because today we've got some actors who require age verification, but the moment let's say a state in the US says, okay, you need to do age verification, they simply move themselves out of that market and say, okay, we believe that it's impossible to do age verification, or it will violate the privacy. It's not going to work, and they simply don't do it. They hope that their clients will find them anyway using VPN, for instance. So
Well, classification accuracy is what we need. It's not age estimation accuracy that we need. Maybe you can use internally age estimation.
I commend your
That's the
opinion.
output is not the age of the
I
individual.
sincerely hope that my clients also
Now,
agree.
If you have a classification system, for example, in the medical area, saying whether the person has a cancer or doesn't have the cancer. Well, some people you really don't know because it's a limit, it's very hazy to classify them having the cancer or not having. And it's better to say, in some cases, I don't know, because there is not sufficient assurance that it is in one class or the other.
And I think that's something that is being considered, is the idea that you're going to have a classification of binary as in yes or no, but also an unclassified.
It's not a
Well-
it's binary, but it's not a Boolean yes
Yeah.
or no.
Yes, because
It's
it's a
different.
confidence association.
Because the question is not are you, well, when we come back to edge assurance or edge control, the question is not are you older or younger than 18? Either it's the question, are you older or are you under? It's not both at the same time. So if the question is, are you older? The answer is yes, you belong to the class. And the other response is either you don't belong to the class or it is indeterminate whether you belong to the class or not. This is a hazy situation. And if you recognize the fact,
But it's also the insurances.
if you
It's not just
recognize the fact that the crazy situation can happen, then you don't make any more mistake. Because in some cases, when it is a second answer, you will not grant the access to the person, you will deny the access. But you don't know exactly why the answer was denied, or the attribute was not received, because maybe the user was not willing to go to this age assurance component, was not to, because he does not trust that one, or he changed his mind, or there was an error in the protocol.
Well, if I'm the relying party, though, I don't really care why it failed, I just.
You don't care.
Yeah, I don't
So-
care, I'm making an age-related eligibility
Exactly.
decision.
So
And
it's not
based on what my
Exactly.
provider is telling me,
exactly,
it's like my provider says, this meets your policy.
it meets
doesn't.
the criteria or
It
doesn't
meets the
meet it,
criteria or it
or
doesn't.
it's anything else.
And why the criteria or not is now isolated from me as a relying party.
Now, suppose,
I feel like we've
suppose that
we were on.
All right, so have we gone off track here? We might get back on track.
Just one thing, so I think I sense there was kind of general agreement that there's more than one measure of the efficacy of an age assurance system.
Yeah.
Mark, I totally take your point around, there's real value to the regulators in being able to have kind of levels or whatever, with my classifications, we might call them.
That's their hope.
I mean, speaking as an architect for age assurance systems, it's been really valuable to us to have the levels that ACCS currently give, and it's provided a source of motivation for improvement of the system and a basis of comparison with competitors, which has been very helpful. So I think there is real value in having those kind of levels. I personally feel like probably we need to try to set out a number of different factors which need to be measured with levels for each of those factors. So around security, you know, to what level of their vulnerability potential attack vectors, around binding, what's the level of confidence we've got for binding, around accuracy. So how frequently or infrequently are we they're false positives and false negatives, because both of those things are potentially important, but maybe different relative importance in different use cases.
well, I look at many documents related to artificial intelligence, for example, in the medical sector, because from the notation or from the scanner or many other documents, trying to know whether the person has the disease or has not the disease. I was only able to find one document where my ID card came from, where there is the inconclusive interval, which is with this interval, it cannot conclude one way or the other. And as soon as you know that interval, in this case of age, I would say, maybe the system making an age estimation will say within 1 year and a half, around 18, I cannot be really conclusive. But I can be conclusive outside. I mean, 2 years, I know how to do that. 1 year, I don't know. But, and it's much better to recognize that than to give a bad result.
So speaking of the way that certainly the retailers we talk to, I think expect the system to work. So generally speaking, I see we would run an age estimation. If the age estimation is confident that the person is over the threshold age, then age estimation stands. If age estimation is not confident the person's over the age threshold age, then at that point you fall back to age verification.
Well, today, I'm very sorry. I like our age verification.
I pick that up.
Today, you cannot do that yet. Okay? I would like to talk. Now, if I look at the document from ACCS, they have invented what is called the challenge age and the age gate. Basically, the age gate is, let's say, 18, So basically it's a threshold you want to verify, and they put the challenge age at 25,
Which I think is what you've just
which
described.
means you will be more
Roughly
confident
correct, yes.
to reject people that are basically minor. But you are going to frustrate people that may be 21 or 22 because they won't be able to access. So you improve the rate of minor who would be, you decrease the rate of minor who will be recognized as adults. But basically you are going to frustrate adults.
So that process is analogous to the one at least we have in the UK today for making age restricted purchases in person. So at the moment, the supermarkets would operate a challenge 25 policy where anybody that looks under 25 would be asked for ID. And anyone that looks over 25 would not be asked for ID.
The problem appears because the system.
I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to talk. Did you have?
That's all right. It's okay. That's it. Do I have what, sorry?
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that,
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I feel like we're very much veering off the topic of this. Like, there's a workshop on Wednesday specifically about the idea of not having it as a binary, but having it as a, like, having yes, no, and
It's a binary still, but it's not a Boolean.
well, exactly, yeah. But so there's a whole workshop for that on Wednesday. So it
Yeah.
feels to me like we probably want to go back to some, and I understand your issues with the levels of confidence, but you know, there are also positives and pros to those. And I think the other thing is that whilst there are a lot of different things that we can produce measures and a lot of complexity to look at, you also have to, as a technology, give that to an end user in a way that they will understand. You know, you need to be able to communicate how effective your system is. So I think that's why they've come up with this. By the way, I'm a statistician, I'm not in this industry, so I just want to, but I think that's why they've come up with these 5 levels you know, and so if they were to go down that route, for example, I think that's, they want us to answer something, think about some of these questions. Sorry.
I kind of said this in the last one, and in many other meetings, I'm gonna say again. That I don't like the measures of confidence, the levels of confidence in here. I don't think that actually help them at all
Okay,
in terms of this fit standard. I think this standard should be more about how do you do the measurements? And it's for then somebody else to set what those thresholds are to get the badge. Which is like Fido, they have things and you have to, particular false match rate, the false one non-match rate. They don't set how to measure false match rate, non-match rate. That's done in 19795. And the pad presentation done in 30106. They tell you how to do the measuring, and somebody else says, these are the criteria you have to meet in order to get our badge. So in my head, the standard to tell you how to do what are the importance you must measure of an age estimation system and how you measure them. And then ACCS can go and make as many badges as they like, or low, high, medium, strict, perfect, whatever you like. And all they say is, we use these measures from this standard to get to that badge. And then they can sell that, and you can sell that for all your competitors and all your clients, and you can have.
so the benchmarking part, I'm sorry. The benchmarking part would say, here's the things that you can measure.
Yeah.
How
How
you can measure them.
how you can measure things, right? Then people, the badge people can say this combination of scores gives you various badges. And then the regulators would say, in order to prevent specific harms that we have identified for your platform, you must only use systems with the following badges.
because I feel like also, because I think the how is important in terms of not just what the measures are.
Yeah.
So we can come up with loads of different measures to measure classification accuracy, false positive rates, et cetera, but we were talking in the session before, it's also how do you design your tests so that actually reflects the use case when you're going to deploy it on. So what should your test subjects look like? What ages should they range? Because if you don't set what ages you're going to include, you could completely game the system.
Exactly.
Like, is your test subject representative in terms of gender, protected characteristics, all of those things? So you need to be able to, like, because I don't think you can just take a technology and say, yeah, it's certified. It's got to be certified to the use case, because it could be, are you more than 18? But it could also be, are you interested? Are you allowing access into a safe space for teenagers, for example, we were talking about? Like, there's loads of different use cases, and those have to be tested in different ways.
Exactly.
And that's missing from part 2 at the moment, just to be clear, there's nothing about what are we testing, how are we testing it, what are the data sets.
Because otherwise it could be
depends at what you look at. because I make comments where I detail everything that should be in part two. And my document is, well, I make 100 comment on part two.
That's even more than me.
And which is much. And basically, I've produced for Working Group 5 a document that incorporates my comments as accepted. I haven't read that. And well, the structure of document is completely different from the current document. And it highlights the important fact is that the requirement or the objective, because there is no requirement, everything is optional. But you have objectives which are nice property to have. It doesn't impose to have every nice property. So you describe which one you have. So you are able to say, I have this property that is supposed to be nice. For example, non-disclosure of the age of the individual, non-disclosure of the date of birth of the individual. It's a nice property to have. You can have a system that discloses the age of the individual. Now, regulator will decide whether they find that acceptable or not acceptable. It's not the duty of the document to say what is imposed, what is acceptable or not acceptable. And as I mentioned, there are about 25 dimensions. And since you need to say what kind of system, what things you have, both, this is distinguished according to the architecture you are supporting. And in part one, there are 5 different architectures that are supported, including one which is not online, because part one is not restricted to online access.
Correct.
It's age, whatever system is being concerned. So there is one specific part detailed for access to premises. And in that case, the answer is not binary, it is ternary. And it's very important to understand why it's ternary. I just finished about that.
So I think that there is some value in having levels of confidence in a spec in that it creates a common vocabulary for characteristics of systems that regulators can use, which helps reduce some of the fragmentation we're seeing in different regions. It creates a common vocabulary that users can start to understand. It creates some interoperability between different businesses. So I think there is a lot of value from those perspectives. I don't know that measurements in terms of numbers like these are, well, one, feasible to meet from a technical standpoint, but more problematically feasible to measure. If, for example, you look at 99.99% confidence, okay, great, let's do a statistical analysis to see if my solution meets that. Okay, what sample population do I need? Well, okay, let's say I'm doing a GovID analysis for Australia. My ground truth data set needs to be twice the population of Australia to have 95% confidence that I've met that goal. And I don't, sourcing that data is tricky in the first place, especially since so much of the data you need to evaluate these systems is children's data. You need to know that you need to have data about children to know if you're classifying them incorrectly. And that has a lot of data handling policies and characteristics around it that can be very challenging to navigate. So I do think that having strict numbers like this rather than characteristics of things or best practices is going to be a harder thing to do in a standardized way or even in an accessible way. Like I'd say there's very few companies that can fund creating ground truth data sets that are big enough for certain populations. And that in and of itself could be problematic.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, and the sample sizes alone would just be so huge to reach those kind of levels that it's impractical. And the other problem, I think, with having set values now anyway, whatever those values would be, is it doesn't really future-proof it because technologies are going to keep changing over the future, aren't they? So it's hard.
And if you're looking at efficacy, I think to speak to your point around security, it's a snapshot at a given point in time of efficacy at most. There could always be a future vulnerability, and all of a sudden your efficacy can plummet overnight if users figure out how to abuse that vulnerability.
I think it's so much for the question one. So I think we don't have much time left, but we can quickly run through the following questions.
Okay.
So the second question is how to get the balance between achieve high accuracy rate and minimize the false accept rejection rates when defining the classification thresholds. So I think I studied statistics before. So I think there is a statistical way by using AUC or ROC to do that, but I'm not sure if anyone have other opinions towards this rather than AUC or ROC curve.
Yeah, the problem is we are again simplifying the problem of an age verification system, which is both a device, a platform, a way of getting an age-related attribute, such as age estimation or age verification. The fact that this attribute is binding to the user or not, or if it can be shared online to anybody. And if we're only talking about statistical measure like area under the curve or anything, we are simplifying the problem to one part of the problem, which is, for example, I'm a non-malicious person presenting in front of a camera without a hat and showing my face in the proper way. And is the system getting estimating my age properly or not? In this case, we can have statistical measurements with area under the curve, accuracy, precision, recall, and I don't remember the fourth statistical. But in the case we're dealing with a whole system where it's possible that one vulnerability sets your accuracy to 0 for the person who used this vulnerability. Does it even make sense to talk about advanced statistical indicators where you are combining a lot of things? Some are linear and you can get accuracy, some are just binary, and it's not so easy. I think.
So is it safe to say that we don't want the standard to be a prescriptive document, but just a description of how we can measure these things, and then the regulators can prescribe what are the objectives that should be achieved by
or it could say the systems should rely on age attributes creation systems with a given accuracy. For example, if your age attribute creation is the age estimation using facial features, you can say, okay, advanced age assurance system should only use age attributes coming from 90% accuracy providers. For example, if your provider is just taking a picture and estimating the age, for this one, it's easy to evaluate the accuracy of the method. But for the whole system, it's fine. But I agree with you. It should describe how to measure things and what things are more common to find in age assurance system. And then there can be levels, but they should not be just a percentage, which is hard to define.
Here's a suggestion. So I think we're all fairly violently agreeing that actually the single measure is, whilst would be nice, it's too simplistic. At the moment, that single measure is kind of thankfully it sounds like it's been moved out of the scope, but it's almost baked into part 1, which is the framework of the standard. Taking on board Julian's point, if we moved it out to say theoretically part 4, and we focused initially at least in part 2 on what are the measures, how do we measure them, then that potentially allows us in a future time to say, well, now that we've worked out what it is we're measuring, how we're going to measure it, are there some that we pick out, we say these are particularly important and regulators should consider these as the key things and these this is a minimum bar. You know, that it allows us to do that later rather than trying to figure out what the answer is before you even understood what the question is.
Oh yeah, to be clear, I'm not advocating for the text that's in that appendix right now with those 5. I do think it's really arbitrary and not supported by anything. It was just an attempt that predates me, so I hate to be running away from this, but it's not my text. So
I can tell you where it originates from. Originally, they were thinking that it was possibly to evaluate the system using the common criteria.
Yeah.
As a target of evaluation.
Yeah.
And in that case, it makes sense to have that kind of levels. But since there are so many dimensions, and it's not, the problem is not in the tool, because it's an ecosystem, it's impossible to do that.
So it makes sense in part 2 to define here are the attributes that are specific to age assurance. Because some of these things like, there's some aspects of security that are not specific to age assurance and they can be specified elsewhere and they don't have to be in these standards. But there are some that are specific to this, like for example, facial estimation or something like that. And we can make sure that all those are in part 2. And we probably don't have to have the confidence, what are we calling it here? Levels of confidence, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe just talk about that at a super high level in the appendix, but get rid of all this detail of two components of this and that and blah, blah, blah. Which doesn't sound like any. Doesn't seem useful. Sorry, Kenny.
I think we talked pretty much about the threshold stuff and the confusion matrix, like different statistical standards. I think we can just move on to the final three questions. Well, I think we can focus on the last two questions about the strategies and how can strategies can be employed to monitor this kind of performance, and how do the stakeholder collaborate to do the standardization of the assessing of all these statistical indicators to fostering more transparency, comparability, and trust among all the regulators and users.
Well, there was a question which is using the right wording, classification accuracy
Which
on the screen. And don't speak about basic or whatever. Classification accuracy measure the ratio of the number of correct prediction. I'm talking in the area of age estimation. So you predict the age. So the number of correct prediction to the total of input samples multiplied by 100 to turn it into a percentage. And the correct prediction will be either it belongs to the class, or either it does not belong to the class, or it is indeterminate whether it belongs to the class or not. And with that, we can define what is classification accuracy. But it means that the system has to recognize that there is some age ranges where it is indeterminate whether the person belongs or not to the class. For example, it's to say if the person is 1 year above or under the threshold value, it's not possible to know that. And as plus, now it will say my system is very good because it provides an accuracy, let us say, of 3%. I will not speak about the accuracy I've seen. It's not bad already for age estimation. But if it will not accept people that are too close to the hash threshold value. And for my system, it will be 1.5 years. For another system, it will be 2 years. For a very bad system, it will be 5 years.
It's challenge 25 to the 7-year window.
Yeah.
That's
Is the no and the inclusive really wrapped up in the same thing? Because surely if you're confident that it's no, then that person is not allowed into whatever content they want. Whereas if it's inconclusive, they have to go through another process.
Yes.
It feels to me like those things aren't the
You
same.
cannot go to another process today, because if you go to another age estimation system, it may give you the result.
What I'm saying is if you're confident it's no, you don't go to the next step. And if you don't know, you go to the next step. So it's yes, no, or inconclusive. I don't think no and inconclusive are the same thing.
I think they may not be in some use cases. So I think in some use cases, you want to say, actually, we age estimate this person, we're sure that they're 12.
Yeah.
Or we're sure that they're under 18. And therefore we don't offer age verification. Whereas if we're unsure, then at that point
You go to the next.
You go to the next thing, so.
Because you would, if you were confident, if you're confident it's a no, you don't want to put them through the next step. That doesn't
You
make
don't know
sense.
what it's not no.
I don't know.
The second binary state is either you don't belong to the class or I don't know.
But I'm saying, is that the case?
This
for an
is
age- for a
your system
technology?
design, you make these choices
Yeah.
as a system designer, you could say, if I have a facial recognition system that, has a curve, right? It's really good at people over 25, it's okay at people 19, it's terrible at people 30, right? Whatever, right? So you have this categorized system, but that's just one component in your system. So then you take whatever output it gives you, yes, no, or maybe, And then you weight that appropriately compared with other components that you're bringing in. Maybe you're not bringing in any other components. That is your only thing. And then you have some logic that looks at your weighting and gives the final age-related eligibility decision, yes or no. But the components that coming in, you could have all kinds of components. You could have one component. You could look at them all at once, or you could look at them in series. It's really up to your system design and then how you express that to your customers. Like if I'm a age assurance service provider, I have to somehow provide some categorization of my system to people who want to be my customers. And they have to be sort of, at this point in time, they have to be pretty sophisticated to really know what it is they're buying. And I think that's a problem for the relying parties, because the regulators are looking at them right now and telling them, you must be able to achieve this thing. And they're like, wow, it's really hard and I can't even evaluate the technology that is available to you.
I went one step further. You can choose your classification accuracy, and you can contact, let's say, an edge estimation component saying, for the edge that has special value, I want a classification accuracy of 2%, or I want a classification of accuracy of 10%. And basically, the inconclusive interval will not be the same. It will be dependent about the classification accuracy that you wish. So the question should not be simply, what is the, what kind of edge estimate can you do for the 18 threshold? Should say, what kind of estimates can you do for this 18 threshold with that accuracy measurement? As I told you, it may be 10%, it may be 2%. More people will be excluded, less people will be excluded, depending about the accuracy you wish to know. But what is important from a relying party point of view is to be able to estimate or to know the accuracy level implied by the response. And in that case, you can choose that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you could, if the response that you're giving back isn't just yes, no, or maybe, or it's yes, 80%. Then
No, it's dependent on what you requested.
well,
You
yeah,
can request the accuracy level.
well, what I'm saying,
I'm saying the classification.
I'm
accuracy
thinking about this
is very-
at the level above, so just at the component generation level, I'm delivering some attributes. And actually it's probably multivariate, it's probably got, you know, the yes or maybe and a confidence level.
No,
But then at the level above, you've got the policies
you
coming
should
in.
not return the confidence level because it's not privacy respecting. You can ask to say, please give me a
I don't
measurement
understand that. I don't
that
understand how
you
to
should not
turn on
return
privacy.
the confidence level.
I think that depends on your use case. Right? I mean, when point forward, it depends on the implementation. So if we're talking about you're doing online access to something, you might really care about privacy. If you're doing it in an asylum point, it's actually I want the confidence level because I'm going to me as the immigration system, I'm going to tune those levels all the time. I want you to just give me the raw stats out of the 18. How confident do you think are? How accurate do you think it is? What confidence level is? That's what we do with e-gate sheet. It comes back with a, I think they're matched to the performance market to this level of confidence. And I've got a load of planes coming in with lots of people that I recognise. I just say that calm down and let them all in. It's really fine. And same thing applies here. This will depend on your use case, where you're using it. Whether it's gambling, for access to adult material, for pharmaceuticals, alcohol, knives, acids, guns, all of those things will alter what you feel your threshold is, and what you feel those confidence tools should be. That's why I think they should be expressed separately from the other bits.
Are we out of time?
Yeah. So feel
Is it
free to.
useful?
Yeah. I think that's-
I think so.
I think my thinking has been evolved through the session.
So that's.
It's like, because I think it's like across the site. If I go to the apartment, I've got over the China, they've got IT look over 25. I haven't so over 25 is not like 17.
Right.
This is not a place that looks over 25. If I go to the US, 9 of the time, they go, "Good ID." I'm like, "You not seen this? What's going on?" And it's go, "Oh, because their risk averseness is like, I want to see the physical card because there's so much regulatory compliance that, I don't know what will happen when it goes wrong, but I'm actually going to get a massive fine and get kicked by the regulator. So it's like, I'm going to card everybody, I'm clearly not under 21.
There's a discussion we had in the other room an hour ago, which is, when we say assurance, we're really talking about the risk appetite of the relying party.
Fine, yeah. And that case, it's like, there is appetite, really knows, I want to see an ID no matter what. I don't care.
Yeah, no risk appetite.
So no risk appetite at all, yeah.
Even if it causes friction and losing new customers,
Yeah.
no risk appetite.
Yeah, I'm assuming there are regulatory barriers, there are regulatory fines, so it must be really high, but that's terrifying so much that I'm not willing to pretend that I'm prepared to take that risk.
Or it could just be, that they don't trust their systems.
System or staff.
But yeah, well, and this is the offline case that Denny was pretty much scorning,
Yeah.
which is, sometimes there's humans in the system and they're making subjective choices. And that's an offline decision, but you still can have age assurance processes and providers that are in it.
That's the other thing with most with these really high numbers like 99, 99, they all sound great for marketing, but they're probably unachievable. And probably massively in excess of what a human currently has. Human accuracy is ridiculously important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like these systems don't need to be perfect, they just need to be better than the current crack processes that we have.
In terms of efficacy, you mean?
Yeah, people are really bad.
But if the system is slightly better than what you have today, but it's easy to bypass it,
Well, yeah, it's a bypass problem.
and there is a massive data collection,
Yeah.
then it's not proportionate, at least under EU law. So we don't only need something that is slightly better, we need something that is actually good.
And people have a different expectations of what accuracy technology must achieve compared with what they expect from humans. So, speaking to some retailers, when they do their own tests, they're getting maybe 1 in 4 people that should be answer ID not getting answer ID. And yet, I think it is reasonable to expect technology to achieve 99 or 99.9%.
Getting a lot better.
And that is achievable, I think, in terms of true negative rate today.
It's not too dissimilar to what went through post biometric stuff 10 years ago. They were okay, and they got so good now that got the list of stats. So it's like we're in thousands of a percent difference between the algorithms, and they're all way better than people. You can tell the difference between twins when people can't.
Oh my God.
They're really good. And we've done it on CCTV. So you can walk people down the street, I'll tell you which twin's which. They're really good. Those algorithms work. So that's not the thing they're worried about. They're worried about presentation tactics, like how do I pass myself off for somebody else, rather than how accurate is match. The matches are accurate.
Yeah, and so this back to the efficacy thing. Okay, so like what we call age verification. That sounds like it's very solid, right? I'm looking at some credential either on a placard or in a database or something like that, and it's got my birthday attribute and it has my facial portrait attribute. And so pulling that the date of birth attribute, well, that's pretty reliable, right? It's OCR or it's data in the database, but then they have to match my current face to that picture there. Now you're back to percentage accuracy again.
But even the anti-fraud system has to be in place to make sure that the actual text written on the OCR is the one from the real document, because you're presenting a digital copy. You're not presenting the one with the holographic seal or anything on it.
Right.
So you have so many sources of possible fraud and possible errors.
Yeah.
The people who think age verification and age estimation is completely different in terms of verification is perfectly accurate and the other one is not. I think
that was the point I was trying to make. Sorry, yeah.
There are attack vectors for both.
For me, it's always estimation. As long as even in France, we have people. It's something with the migrants. I think if you're an immigrant and you're a minor, you have different rights than if you're a major. So there are people who may trick the system and show a false ID from their origin country, saying that they are minors. And French government doesn't know how to determine if these people are really minors as it's written on their government ID, or if they're majors, but they're doing age verification with a document with a holographic seal, etc. So, and even this one is not 100% accurate, and it's in person. So you cannot have 100% accuracy even with verification.
There's nice, interesting thing from our perspective, the data estimation is there's an attack vector that we don't see in any other context. So I don't need to use an instrument to form the system. I can just use me or biometric platform we were discussing earlier. Biometric platforms, I'm trying to impersonate somebody else, so I need something that looks like you. But for an age estimation, I can just use me as the basis. The first thing I'm going to do when these things are, I'm going to get a teenager and apply makeup, see what happens. That's my first attack. That's the real world attack now. When I want to buy alcohol when I'm 17.
There was, I think Meta was talking about using selfies for age estimation for a Facebook dating site. You could just imagine what will teenagers do? They'll put on makeup. They'll comb their hair differently. They'll grow out their scruffy little mustache and
Stick on.
it just seems very obviously gay.
Lots of existing Facebook don't think that they don't care because they're interested in the matching bit, which is the eyes and nose bit, they don't really care about. That's the basic features, so you can smooth them to your heart's content and they might care.
So anyway, in the standard right now, so I'll just leave it with this. There are 3 terms, and the way that they're using them, there's age verification, which uses some sort of government issued credential. And then there's age estimation, which is looking at physical characteristics of the person, their face, their heart rate, their hand size, their gait, whatever.
Possibly their social media use thing that there's
So that's this last one.
Okay.
So there's verification, there's estimation, and then there's everything else, and that's called inference. So looking at your social graph, inference. Do you have a credit card? Inference.
I did see someone doing an installation based on the back of your hand. Apparently that age is in a very particular way.
Yeah, I've heard that that's actually quite good.
Yeah, well, that's a big.
But that's apparently really good at age estimating smaller children.
Yeah.
If I understand.
Yeah. I think on Wednesday, we have more talk and session about the technology, including the deepfake attack, to how the verification skills models and how the attack models, they combat each other on Wednesday. So please feel free to join on Wednesday, and thank you for everyone today.
Thank you.
So, I don't know if you know this, but
Yeah.
Denis kind of takes over the room.
Okay.
The French guy who's here.
Oh,
Denis Pinka.
I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying, he
will take up.
he takes over he will take over the room and do all the talking and So I think you as the moderator should be looking out for that and like grabbing back control.
Oh, yeah.
Like making him make space for other people. And
Okay.
I'm just saying,
It's really hard,
He-
isn't it?
Yeah,
he is particularly hard, but there could be other examples in other rooms where this
Yeah.
comes up. So for you as the moderator,
Yeah.
you're gonna need to take back control.
About if somebody speaks too much, right?
If somebody speaks
Yeah.
too much or goes off topic,
Yeah.
or like there were a couple places where people started to talk and then he just talked over them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so you gotta shut that down.
I don't know if Danny is. No.
He's just a guy. It doesn't matter. if he's
Oh,
not.
that guy.
That guy,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Denis Pinkas, also known as that guy.
Oh,
He's got a lot of interesting things to say without.
Yeah.
He
but
does, but
like,
he,
you're right, making room for others as well.
yeah, you have to make room for
yeah,
others.
man.
I felt like there were some people who were really frustrated in the room and